What is up, everybody? After a month's time of not streaming on the Vish Kumaran show, it is the Vish Kumaran show featuring my two most popular and favorite co-hosts / guests as a part of the big show created by the great Larry Krueger, my friends Jessie Naylor, Larry Krueger. What's up, guys? Jesse, how's it going?
Good, man. Fantastic to be back here with you. I love this show every single week. And we were just talking backstage. We're like, man, it's a slow time of the year. But as Cosmo knows, good luck if we can get up and down in 90 or under. We'll see.
I know. And by the way, Cosmo, I saw your comments. Don't worry. I saw it. And of course, you're going to have to subscribe to say what you have to say. I still remember the particular episode that you became angry with me. I'm slowly going to work back to build your allegiance, one subscription at a time, each time you're attending this show. Larry's going to turn Brother Bob. I will turn Cosmo. That's what the big show is going to do week after week. What's up, Larry? How's it going?
Well, I mean, any week I can beat Rob's stats at his own in his own pool. I got to consider that a good week. I really felt like the being a road game, being that it's his whatever website that had the contest. I thought, no way.
Are you talking about the March Madness poll?
Right. There's no way I was going to beat Rob Stats Carrera, but the other night I got on there and I told all the Krueg Nation, you know what, do me a solid, get me past Rob Stats Carrera. I don't even care if I beat Barrows after that. I just wanted to beat Stats, and it happened. So thank you to all the Krueg Show fans for voting early, voting often, and getting me beyond Rob Stats.
Dude, Vish knocked off Grant. That was huge. That was like a 12 beating a 5 or like a 14 beating a 3. Oh, we lost Vish. Oh no. Oh no.
See what happens? See what happens when you talk about stuff like that?
That was my fault. And there's nothing we can do because he's got the overlay on us, so we can't like change. There it is. Hey Larry, how you doing, bud? How you doing? It's like I'm doing pull-ups. Hold on. I'm doing pull-ups. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, he knocked out Grant, dude. That's crazy. It was like a 13-4 seed type of deal going on over there. That was good.
I know. I kind of wondered about that, and I'm kind of thinking looking at the way this thing shakes out.
What the hell
Brad's going to win the whole damn thing. Brad's going to win the whole damn thing because Brad has this connection with his audience. And it's a online based relationship, and it's an online based deal. I think that you can't win this thing if you have any group of people that, like, the most popular people have people that hate them, and Grant is probably the most popular person in this realm. So he has a bunch of Grant fans, but he also has a bunch of Grant enemies. So I think it's somebody like Brad who's just doesn't really have too many enemies and is just a force of nature as far as followers and content and the way he sits at his computer and puts out, every headline. And I think when it all comes down, I think it's going to, if Brad tells his crew, vote for me, I think it's Brad's deal to lose.
Yeah, I think Brad, first of all, Brad does an awesome job. Shout out to him. He really does deserve all the props you just gave him, Larry. To me, it's does Croc not go back to back? I've seen Croc in person at like events and stuff. Croc is just the guy like people want to like vote for. They want to be around him. He's got a swag people like. I say there's no way he doesn't go back to back. And it was like a hand of God.
Man. Look at the numbers. Look close at the numbers of what he gets.
I haven't seen the numbers, so you could be right.
Brad is going to win this thing if he wants to.
Okay.
If he wants to, if he says to all of his peeps, vote Brad, Brad will win. I
Yeah.
think this year, but Croc is great.
Fair
I mean,
enough.
there's a lot of good people. But you did take down Grant, which
Yeah, and I
was an
was just
amazing
about to
thing.
bring that up. It was like a lightning strike, like it was like a divine intervention. Jesse brought it up and I immediately disappeared from the screen, as it should be. That was a very like shocking thing. I don't know even know how to react to that. That's weird to me. It really is weird to me. That shouldn't be happening. I think he also, like, I remember last year I went against Grant in this same exact poll, and it was on Twitter. And obviously, like, part of me is still looking at that Twitter poll, trying to see like how well are we doing. And I think he was ahead of me by like 20-25% for a large portion of it. It was an embarrassing beatdown. So shout out to whatever the turnaround was, but the change of audience, moving it to the site away from Twitter, whatever it is, it changed the results for me. But a very weird thing. I don't know how to react to that. Let's get to Arik Armstead, guys, because that's
right,
that's
do
the
it.
big meat on the bone today. That's the big story. So Arik Armstead on his podcast, which I think he does with the Title League. Shout out to Keegan. I think we've all communicated with him at different points. Really nice
Yep.
guy. That's the podcast Arik Armstead does. He mentioned that he felt disrespected by the 49ers offer. Jesse, I'm going to start it with you. What did you think of Armstead's comments? Is this a big deal? Is this representative of just what is business in the NFL, or is it representative of maybe the 49ers did dirty or did something dirty by one of their longest tenured franchise players, their perennial Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate? What do you think?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. Ultimately, I do think that it's a business play. The 49ers have got to do what they got to do to try to win. Arik Armstead has to do what he has to do to try to get paid and continue to make the most money he can in this short window that you call an NFL career. So that's what it comes down to. But man, when you really look at it, $6 million is ultimately what they asked him to get paid, with up to $2 million in incentives. And you go look at the guys that are getting paid $6 million at that position. It's guys that you've never heard of for the most part. That's not a lot of money for that position. Think about it like this. The best player in the world at defensive tackle, Chris Jones, just got paid what, 32 a year? Was it 32 a year? 32 a year. They asked Arik Armstead to make $6 million. 26 minutes. Now, listen, I understand that there's a gap in talent there, but the gap in talent is not 32-6. Arik Armstead is still a very good player. He's still very productive. And ultimately, to me, I still can't get over the fact that they basically said, hey, you're going to cost us X amount to get rid of you. That difference was not a lot of money if you would have stayed on the roster. The fact that they only offered him $6 million tells me that they didn't want him to be here for whatever reason. They were ready to move on from Arik Armstead. They gave him something that they knew he would probably be offended by, knowing he would say no, and they could say, hey, then go test the market and do your thing. Now, good for him. He tested the market. He got paid good money, got one last payday in. But ultimately, this is a business. It's a shrewd business. Arik Armstead has a beef, but the 49ers feel like it was the right move. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I can empathize with Arik, but I also understand what the 49ers were doing.
Krueg, what do you think?
I think the message was clear. They thought his body had broken down and they didn't want to invest anymore. And I mean, there's no logical way. I mean, you gave him a third of what he was making, basically. You offered him a third of what he was making. You knew he would turn it down. You got the result you wanted. Shanahan, when he was talking in Orlando earlier this week, when Malik Collins' name came up, it was like the fourth word out of his mouth was healthy. They feel like Jordan Elliott and Malik Collins are going to be healthier than Arik. They paid Arik roughly 17 to 20 million a year for a few years, and he missed a bunch of games. The guy had 13 sacks in 4 years. He's got the kinds of injuries that are chronic injuries. Like, is he not going to have plantar fasciitis next year? No, he is. So the 49ers, and the thing that's the most, I guess, galling is that, the Niners, I'm sure, would say, hey, there was a health injury situation, but they offered Yetur Gross-Matos more money, and he missed the same number of games. So is Yetur Gross-Matos worth more than Arik Armstead? I think it was pretty clear that they wanted to move Armstead to move on. He was which is surprising because he's the longest tenured Niner. He is, their Walter Payton Man of the Year, works in the community guy. Very surprised. I understand why he's insulted. I get it. But this is like the reality of like hard business in the NFL. You got to go with whoever you think is healthier. And they felt that Collins and Elliott were going to be a healthier play going forward and cheaper. And then they're also staring at having to pay Purdy, 25 to 50 in that range, probably next year. And said, let's try to get fiscally right this year and trim our budget as much as we can without losing anything. So I understand why Eric's upset. I'd be upset too. But it was pretty clear they spoke. It's like, some teams like to say, hey, we made him an offer. We offered him a chance to return. Yeah, no, you didn't. You offered an amount of money you knew would insult him, and you knew that he would easily reject, and he easily rejected it, and he's somewhere else. So, but all of this was the Niners doing. They knew exactly how he was going to react, and he did. And now they've moved on from him.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it perfectly. I agree that it felt like once they offered that, they weren't fully interested in re-signing him. I think they offered it out of like, hey, this is what we're planning to pay the position. Because if you look at what Malik Collins got, it's very similar to what they were trying to get Arik Armstead to restructure into, or what a Malik Collins contract is for the next year. And so I think that they gave him the opportunity from that standpoint. Arik Armstead has been a very good player. He's been a very good player for a long time. I totally understand why he would feel some type of way. I mean, just imagine you put yourself in this position, right? You're a long tenured employee at a franchise, and look at it from Eric's perspective. He was drafted in the first round. The regime that drafted him got fired immediately, right? He was drafted by Jim Tomsula, and Eric Mangini was his defensive coordinator. They got fired. Then that was a 3-4 scheme where he was asked to play 5 technique and 2 gap. Then he's asked to 2 gap for Jim O'Neill in the worst run defense scheme of all time, which he wasn't comfortable doing. Then 3rd regime change of his career, 1st round pick, 2 years down the drain. Now he's got the 3rd regime change of his career. Now they have a scheme change. They're a 1 gap front, 4 down front. Arik Armstead cuts 20 pounds to play Leo in 2017 because the 49ers didn't have anybody else to play that position. Then he puts the 20 pounds back on in 2018 and plays as their big end. Then he plays as their big end and kicks inside. Then he ultimately gets his contract. Then he kicks inside again. The guy has done a lot for the 49ers. He's sacrificed a lot. I understand why he was insulted by the offer. It sucks. It's painful, but that's just business. That's business in life. That's business in the NFL. It's a similar type of situation. Clearly, the 49ers had made a decision that they had to move on from, like we talked about, right? We brought up a variety of names in terms of the larger tier players on the 49ers that they could move on from. They chose Armstead. Krueg, if I'm not mistaken, that's who you said you would move on from as well. That's what happened. Again, I don't think Armstead is in the wrong for feeling salty about it. I don't think anybody should be mad at Armstead for being salty about it. But I also don't think that there's any reason that he can't. I don't think that him being salty about it changes anything, because that's just business in the NFL. It's cold-blooded, and that's life.
Yeah.
I mean, well said.
Is. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say this real quick, because a lot of people, I'm seeing the chat, I'm trying to keep the pulse of the chat. And, one of the things was like, well, Juice took a pay cut and he plays in every game. It's like, well, Juice was asked to take a 25% pay cut. Armstead was asked to take a 65% pay cut. Like these two things are not the same. You know what I mean? And 100%. Arik Armstead, here's the thing is Arik Armstead was given an offer. He decided not to take it. The 49ers obliged him, and we're moving on. But we as fans do this weird thing where when a player's on our team, you can't talk bad about him. Don't say anything bad about him. He's a 49er. He's the best in the world. You don't know what you're talking about if you don't praise this player. But the moment they're gone, literally within seconds, it's like, bum. He sucked anyways. Get him out of here. Look at this. It was like, oh, well, where was all this for the last 3 years? I didn't see any of this in my chat. So I don't know. It's just an interesting dynamic that we as fans go through, where it's like we praise a player, we love a player when he's wearing red and gold. And then the moment he makes a decision that's best for him, it's like, trash, get him out of here. I don't know. I don't understand it personally.
I kind of get it. It's human nature, right? Like, we root for the 49ers and we cheer for the 49ers. It's natural for us to all root for the good guys. So we think of the 49ers as the good guys in this entire story arc of our fandom, right? They're the good guys in this fandom. Well, think about it from our perspective, right? Jesse, you and I both work corporate jobs. In our corporation, if there was a respected, long tenure employee who survived long turmoil within the corporation and was one of the key pieces in ensuring the corporation made it to the top, he was a guy everybody around us respected. He was the guy who, he was a good family man. He was a leader. He was all of those things in the workplace, and the company does him dirty. Of course, we're going to feel a little bit salty about the company because they did a nice guy dirty. And I think that's what happens, right? You don't want to feel salty about the 49ers. So why would you say, well, they might have done something to Arik Armstead that's icky? Now, it's not wrong. I think people look at it and say what they did. Now I'm going to say what they're doing to the 49ers is wrong. What the 49ers did was wrong, which is not what I'm saying. What they did to Arik Armstead is completely valid. It's fine. It's a little bit icky, but that's business. And people don't want to feel that ick when it comes to the 49ers and towards Armstead. So how do you justify them doing this to Armstead? Well, he sucked anyway. He's only worth $6 million anyway. Why would you pay him anything else? And that's natural. That's human nature. I justify plenty of things in my life with a similar way. I certainly won't poo-poo anybody who has a similar reaction, though it's a little bit annoying because I think Armstead does deserve better from us as a fan base, especially given how hard we were on him so early in his career for things that were beyond his control, the way he turned it around, the kind of man he was for the 49ers, the kind of football player he was for the 49ers. I think he does deserve better, and I think ultimately he's in a better place, and the 49ers are also okay without him. That's my ultimate takeaway. Krug, you've been nodding your head. You got anything to add?
Well, I mean, just from being in the room, I mean, this was a major leader in their room. I mean, we can say any bad things we want about him. He was their best defensive tackle against the run. They were noticeably worse when he wasn't on the field. Hopefully the guys they got will be as good or better. They'll be cheaper as a tandem, but can they be better? But they lost a real dude. I mean, they lost a real leader in that room. I just from walking in there every day, it's like this guy was held in very, very high regard by the rest of his defensive line mates, by the rest of the guys on the team. So they lose a major leader, and we'll see how it goes. They're younger, they're cheaper. It was the right move for them, but we'll see what their defense looks like and how galvanized and together they are, because Arik was a big leader in that room for sure. No question about it.
Krug, what you just said piqued a different thought for me, and I think it would bring up a different conversation that we could go to if we're good on Armstead. You guys good on Armstead? So
Sure.
we can go there. So you brought up Armstead's leadership, right? And one thing that I noticed this year that I don't think many people really cared about, and I don't think it really matters, was that Nick Bosa went from being a team captain in 2022 to not being elected team captain this year when he missed the entire offseason, right? Makes sense. The guy wasn't there the entire offseason. He wasn't the team captain. But since Bosa has come to this defensive line, they've always had a long-tenured player that is the leader, right? Buckner was the leader when he first came, and then Armstead pretty much took that role when Buckner left. A guy that everybody looks to, a guy that sets the tone, the guy that's the consummate professional. Not that Bosa isn't, but the other guy is the guy that everybody looks to as the veteran leadership. Do you think that there's going to be a difference now? Nick Bosa obviously got his money this offseason. We know he deserved it in terms of his on the play. Is there a different expectation on Nick Bosa this year now that he is the leader of the 49ers defensive line? Armstead is no longer the veteran in the room. The veteran in the room for the 49ers defensive line is now Nick Bosa. Of course, Hargrave is there, but I still think because Bosa was drafted by the team, he's been through this entire tenure, he would be the guy pressed upon for leadership. I'll start with you, Krug, because you've been in the locker room. You just talked about how meaningful Armstead's impact is. What do you think about Bosa? Do you think he can establish himself in that role? And do you think that's a key in terms of the 49ers being able to replace not just Armstead's effect on the field, but the intangible effect he provided in the locker room?
I think they need to find some really tough guys on their front in the draft, whether they be linebackers or defensive linemen. I think the leader is probably now goes back to Fred Warner, maybe a little bit of Dre Greenlaw when he gets healthy. I think those guys become the leaders. I mean, Nick Bosa leads by his play, but he's not a stand up and rally the troops kind of a guy. He does speak on Saturday nights now, but I think it's more personality driven. What's Malik Collins' personality? What's Leonard Floyd's personality? What's Jordan Elliott's personality? Can anybody really ascend? Can they find a unique player? I mean, Bryant Young, according to a lot of the 94 Niners, was one of the main leaders on that 94 team. He was a rookie, and so was Bar None. So leadership in the room has a lot more to do about your personality, I think, and your production more than just your pay and your production. You know what I mean? We look for the guys who make the most to lead, and Bosa will be a leader. I'm just saying that I don't think he's a natural leader. I think, a guy like Fred Warner is much more of a guys, let's get it going. And who knows, maybe one of the guys they signed in free agency on the defensive side is also a leader. Maybe they can find some leadership by who they draft. That will be interesting, but I definitely think they could use some tone setting players on their defense that they don't have right now.
Jesse, what do you think? You think that like Krug, they could use some tone setting presence, or do you think Bosa could maybe step up and be the leader of the defensive line? Or do you think like Krug, it's more of a Fred Warner and a group by committee? How do you think they replace Armstead's leadership specific to their defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what some of the. I mean, Floyd's a veteran. Maybe he brings that. Hargrave can step into that role potentially. I think, like Krug said, it's a personality trait. I think Greenlaw not being there early on, assuming he's going to miss some games, him and Armstead not being there, that could be a little bit tight. I've always wanted somebody like a Chris Jones on this team that would get in a player's face on a sideline, hold him accountable, just a tough, nasty guy. And I've talked about this in the past, and I've been told that guys like Fred are that guy. Now, Fred's a great leader. I'm not saying that he's not, and he'll get in the offense's head during practice, but it's very rare that you see an exchange on the sideline when two players are fired up and getting in each other's faces, trying to hold each other accountable. I feel like the 49ers have never really had that during this regime. That's not a shot at Shanahan or anything like that. It's just something that has been missing, a fire that's been missing from this team. Not saying that I want these guys to fight each other or anything crazy, but I don't think there's anything wrong with grabbing a teammate by the face mask and being like, yo, you're not playing good enough in this moment. Let's go. So it's not just because Armstead's gone. Armstead didn't bring that either. I think this team could use that. Now, did you get that through free agency? I doubt it. Are you going to get that through the draft? Probably not. But it's something that I think that I've been desiring to have on this team for a while. And I don't think losing Armstead helps that. I don't think adding the guys that they added help that. It's just kind of something that's been missing, in my opinion.
That's a really interesting point. And I wonder if it just speaks to team culture. Because as you were saying that, I was just thinking about it, and I was like, I don't feel like any 49er on the team is really that kind of guy. They all seem to be more, hey, when my teammate's down, I'm going to uplift him. I'm going to be George Kittle and make a joke and get him up and get him going and hype him up. That seems to be more their vibe when they're down. Krug, again, you're around this team a lot. Do you find that to be the way they handle their downs, or do you think there is hey, Chris Jones, let's huddle up and Chris Jones is going to talk to the team and he's going to tell the team and everybody's going to listen to Chris Jones because he's the freaking man. He's made the big plays in the big games, and we're going to keep our poise listening to him. What do you think would be the Niners style?
I think they've got some really strong leaders on offense. I mean, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Kyle Juszczyk, Aaron Banks, JJ. I think those guys are all really kind of like they're guys who, show up ready to play and demand their teammates play at their level. I mean, I thought maybe the greatest leadership I saw all year was Christian McCaffrey, in the way he showed up to mini camp and then training camp, where it was just like, hey guys, I'm playing at my level and you guys can all look really bad or you can step it up. And I don't know if he ever said anything, but just the level that he played at was like demanded that other guys kind of meet that level. And I don't know who that player is on defense. Is it Demo Lenore? Is it Jair Brown? Is it Huff? Is it Fred? Is it Mooney? I don't know. I really don't know. I do think, though, just from being around their D line last year, that they could use a little bit more nasty up front. And maybe Collins, maybe Elliott, maybe Gross Matos, maybe Floyd, maybe those guys can deliver that. But they need a little bit more, like, some where you're in the room and you're like, I don't. Some of these guys are rough. They don't have a rough guy. Chris Jones is kind of rough. They don't have that guy that's like, man, you're a little on your pins and needles asking this guy questions because he's got this kind of anger streak. I think you need a little bit of that on defense, especially in your front, and I haven't seen that. So hopefully, either guys they signed or guys they draft can give them a little bit more juice, a little bit more anger, a little bit more like, hey man, I'm playing at this level, and you sure as hell better play at this level, or we're gonna have problems. I think they could use a couple guys like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what speaks to Fred Warner, right? When we're talking about this conversation, I don't think anybody is saying Fred Warner isn't one of the key leaders on the 49ers. But I think where his name kind of gets lost is you don't feel like he brings that nasty, or that you feel like Greenlaw is more of the physical presence of the Niners linebackers. Anybody who really watches the Niners, I feel like you can feel Greenlaw's physicality off the screen or on the screen or at the game more than you can feel Fred Warner. So I think that's where he falls in this conversation. And Krueg,
Also,
not to
interrupt, but just I think it's important when at the end of the year people were calling out Chase Young for not playing hard. I asked that question the next day to Fred, and Fred was like, "Hey man, who am I to question how hard he's playing? He could kind of question how hard I'm playing, and it's like he wasn't that guy." And then when we got to the all 22 or the live mic version of the Super Bowl, there it was, Chase Young face to face with George Kittle, promising George Kittle, I'm going to give you everything I got. So I get the feeling that Kittle holds guys accountable a little bit more than Fred. I think Fred's a great player. Fred's a great example. Fred plays hard. I don't know that Fred gets in your face mask and says, dude, if you don't play hard, you and I are going to have a problem in the parking lot after. You know what I mean? I think they need that. They need that guy. I mean, you see it, guys. You saw it. Chris.
But I think it's more with Fred. I think let's stick with Fred for just a second when we're talking about needing that guy. Because when you talk about Fred, we can have debates. I thought last year was a very up and down, peak and valley season for Fred Warner. There were games on national TV where he was unreal, and that's why he was a first-team All-Pro. But there's also an Arizona game, Week 12, that Fred Warner didn't play so well. There's a Cincinnati game in between. Fred Warner didn't play so well. There's a Minnesota game in between where Fred Warner didn't play so well. So there's those games. I personally felt like when I looked at Fred Warner in the playoffs, I thought there was a loss of confidence. I really did. And I thought that answer, Krug, that's not a confident answer from the leader of the 49ers defense when he is talking about the effort of somebody else. If Fred Warner is fully Fred Warner and fully confident in Fred Warner, there's no way he should be saying, well, Chase Young should be questioning my effort too. Who can question Fred Warner's effort on that team if he's Fred Warner and he's fully emerged as that leader? Do you think that that's a fair way to look at, hey, part of Kittle is that Kittle doesn't seem to lose that confidence. He always seems to think he's that star. I thought with Warner, there were moments last year where Warner wasn't 100% sure of how he was playing, and Warner could kind of feel that he couldn't control the game the same way he has in the past. Do you think that plays into his kind of answer during Super Bowl week about Chase Young and all of that? Jesse, maybe you can jump in on this first just because you've been a little bit out of the conversation.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I want to say it was after, maybe it was after the Steeler game, or I think it was right before week 1. We were talking about Fred Warner. And I had made an offhanded comment saying, hey, Fred Warner is great, but he's not the tone setter. He's not the thumper. That's Greenlaw. And then I remember that first game. He met who's the running back for the Steelers? Their bigger running
Najee
back.
Harris.
What's his
He
name?
cracked him.
Najee Harris. Yeah, he cracked Najee Harris in the A gap, and everybody's like, "Oh, see, you don't know what you're talking about." And then it was like 2 weeks later, he got Kyron Williams in the A gap and got ran over a little bit. And then you kind of saw where it's like, okay, he does the thing where he'll fly from the side and jump on a player's back and like put his weight on them until they fall down. And yeah, that, and so it's Fred Warner plays like I think his personality is, which is, for a lack of a better term, it's a little bit finesse, right? I'm not saying he's not a tough guy. I'm not saying he's not a badass, but he's not Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw is like that dude. So to me, if Dre Greenlaw can maybe take over a bit of that leadership and kind of be that tough guy to get in people's faces, that would be great. He's definitely a guy that can hold people accountable. I saw some people in the chat talk about Demo. Demo's kind of taking on that tough guy persona, that chip on his shoulder persona. Yeah, I feel like a team needs different styles of leadership. You can't just have one style. You can't just have a bunch of jerks that are leaders. You can't have a bunch of guys that are the nice guys as leaders. You got to have a little bit of both, a little good cop, bad cop. And I feel like Fred Warner, when he's going against the offense, he sets a tone and can kind of be a jerk in practice towards the offense. But I don't know that he's that guy towards the defense when he's holding his teammates accountable, if you feel me. So that's what I feel like this team's missing.
100%. And that's right on, right? And he's talked about that too, because he talked about how Quan Alexander had to kind of bring that personality out of him. So it's not natural for him to be that kind of guy. Krueg, I'll throw it to you with this. I feel like part of this is why Greenlaw's injury is one of the biggest questions of the 49ers this offseason. Maybe the single biggest one, because they need both of those guys to complement each other, right? Like Jesse said, Warner pretty much plays football like a chess player. He plays a very, very cerebral style of football. And he is paired with the gladiator, Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw is see anything that moves, hit it as hard as you possibly can. And they work with each other so perfectly because of that. And I do feel like as much, and I've been someone that hasn't done a good enough job of this, I've never given enough credit to the way they complement each other. I've only given credit to the cerebral style of Fred Warner. And I do think that we saw in enough moments last year that without the complement of Greenlaw, without that toughness, without that gladiator, the chess player can be a little bit overmatched. And I thought that happened a couple of times to Fred Warner. And in fact, I even thought it happened to him a little bit in the Super Bowl. Guys, we focused on Oren Burks a lot. And Oren Burks, for being Oren Burks and having to come into that game, to me, did the best job Oren Burks could have done. But he didn't get supported as he should have by one of the best players on the 49ers defense in Fred Warner on that day. That was not Fred Warner's best performance. And I think not having Greenlaw and where his confidence is all something we have to look forward to in the season. Krueg, what do you think?
I just think this team has lost some really good tone setters over the last couple of years. Jimmy Ward was a really good tone setter. Emmanuel Mosley was a really good tone setter. They've lost some guys who are their tone setters, and they need to find not just football players, but tone setters. They need their Chris Jones. When the intensity is not dialed up, the guy who just absolutely demands it and gets it from everybody instantly. They need some tone setters on all three levels of their defense, on any part of their football team. Guys who say, you know what? Hell, if it's going down like that, it's not going down like that. And I think they miss Jimmy Ward dramatically. And I think they've missed some other tone setting players dramatically, and they're going to miss Aiyuk. So they have to find some tone setting players. I think they have them on offense. Though they could have that one nasty or two more nasty offensive linemen that really set the tone on the offensive line. But defensively, I think they've lost many of their tone setters, and I would even go with a lesser player in this draft if I felt he was a superior tone setter and was incredibly physical and was the kind of personality that demanded physicality out of the troops. So that's how I feel about it. I really believe they need some tone setters. That's why it's important that they go and meet all these guys and figure out not just physically what are they, but mentally, emotionally what are they, and what's their contribution going to be.
And Hufanga's coming back, and he certainly has the kind of energy and ability to be a guy that definitely gets people around him to play better. That would definitely be helpful for the 49ers for sure. Jesse, what do you think? Do you have a tone setter in mind that the Niners can target at this point? I look at it and I find that kind of guy is a hard guy to find, especially in the draft in terms of finding a rookie. Like you said, Larry, Bryant Young impacting the 94 49ers early. Finding a rookie to have that level of confidence is very difficult too.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sure that guy exists in the draft, but I don't know who that guy is. I think that's why Aiyuk is so important, because I feel like Aiyuk is kind of that guy on offense a little bit. Jawan Jennings and Aiyuk are like the parallel of Dre Greenlaw, what Dre Greenlaw brings to the defense. We talked about Fred Warner.
And Debo too.
Fred, yeah,
toughness,
yeah, but he's
Debo
more tough with the ball. With the ball in his hands, yeah. But I'm saying play in and play out. Like, he doesn't block with the intensity that those other guys do. You know what I mean?
I got you. That's my bad. Go ahead.
If Fred Warner was a boxer, he would be Floyd Mayweather, right? Great boxer, one of the best ever. But he wasn't getting in firefights. He was out thinking you in the ring, right? He's a technician. When I'm looking at like Dre Greenlaw, and it's like, oh no, he's Ricardo Mayorga. Like, he's smoking a heater on his way to the ring, ready to take somebody's head off. Like, that's what I'm talking about. So, it's just a difference of style. Like I said, all styles play. Ultimately, I just want a team that wins. But I have thought about that for a while and said, man, the tone setter thing I think it does play. It really does. And I think ultimately, one of the things that I admired in the Chiefs in 2019, as much as I hated Frank Clark talking trash and all those things, I was like, man, those guys really, really come with a different style of intensity. And you can see like maybe why when the rubber met the road and it was like, you just got to go take this victory from the other team, you could see why maybe the Chiefs came out on top in 2019. And maybe that happened a little bit this year too. I don't know.
I'll come at it to you from a different angle, and I'll throw it to Krueg with this. So I talked about the Warner confidence earlier. When I hear you refer to a Frank Clark, I hear the comment section, I see them refer to a Richard Sherman. What I also think you're talking about is just the bravado of that player, his confidence, and how him being so confident and so full of it and just so arrogant that they're going to win, and holding them accountable to the fact that he said they're going to win. Like, that reflects on the players. That shows their confidence, their belief as a unit. I do feel like the Niners are missing some of that bravado. And that's where, to me, it directly ties to Warner's confidence somewhat dissipating, because Bosa's not really a big where you feel his energy and bravado, right? The reason I brought up Debo as an example is because he's a quiet player whose bravado and confidence on the football field is really felt, and that's genuine to his teammates. They feed off of his confidence. When I look at the Niners and I look at Warner's confidence at times last year, to me, feeling like it was down, I felt like that's what played into us not feeling the bravado and swagger of this defense. When Warner is confident, right, he's talking smack to Najee Harris. He's talking smack to the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. But that was not the confident Fred Warner we got at moments last year. Do you think it's as simple as maybe, hey, Kyle Shanahan thinks Nick Sorensen is the guy for the job. He talked about him so effusively. We know the Steve Wilkes relationship doesn't work. Maybe Sorensen, maybe Brandon Staley, maybe Fred Warner's confidence comes back and he just becomes, like, you feel the swagger of the 49ers defense through him once again. Krug, what do you think?
Well, I think they just need more guys like that. It's about finding out. It's not just about doing your scouting of how does he look backpedaling, how does he look in the drills, but you really got to go and know the essence of the football player, and you got to go find those guys. I mean, and you got to find out which guys are those type of personalities that are leaders and that are going to change your football team and that are going to say, hey, it ain't going down now like that. if I'm on the field. I'll tell you a couple that I think that stand out in this area. Michael Hall from Ohio State, the defensive lineman. I mean,
You love him.
I love him. He plays super hard. He plays super tough. Safety wise, Malik Mustafa from Wake Forest. This guy's a tone setter. I mean, he absolutely is. This guy will absolutely knock your block off. And he's looking, he's playing for blood. I like that. I'll tell you an offensive player that I think is like that is the running back from Michigan, who I know the Niners don't need, but Blake Corum is absolutely, plays for keeps, man. That guy's playing for real. Some of these offensive linemen, this Mason McCormick from South Dakota State, that guy's playing for keeps too. So you just gotta you gotta watch the film. You gotta, and usually you gotta have some kind of inside source who tells you, hey, you know what? Blake Corum doesn't just show up to win games. Blake Corum needs to win games, and his need to win games, filters back to everybody else. The greatest of the greats, if you want to go back to the Dallas dynasty of the 90s, Emmitt Smith. There were bigger backs, there were faster backs, there were better backs in a lot of ways. Barry Sanders. But was there anybody who ever had as much, you could feel the will of Emmitt Smith on the field? And there's, you could feel the will of Michael Jordan when he was playing. You could feel the will of Larry Bird. I think Draymond Green is one of those guys. You can feel his will out there. Juwan Jennings is an absolute dog. And what does that mean? He shows up for the W, man. He doesn't show up for the check, the girls, or the fame. He shows up for the win. So you got to kind of figure out, how are guys wired? Can you get a few of these guys? Can you figure out, who's really wired to win? And then get 2 or 3 of those guys in the draft on your side. I think that's, and it's not about 40 time. It's not about tackle percentage. It's not about win rate or anything else. It's about heart and soul and guts. And it's like, the Niners got that. Nobody talks about it, but the Niners got that. They were reeling in the early 90s. Dallas was on top. Niners badly needed an infusion of talent. They got Dion and Norton and all those guys. It helped. But they drafted bar none on offense and Bryant Young on defense, and you could feel the will of both those guys on either side of the ball. And I thought it made all the difference in the world. So if they can find a couple of those players, regardless of position, I think that's the key to this draft.
Absolutely. Well said, Krueg. Jesse, I'm going to kick it over to you with our brand new topic. Jed York talked this week at the owners meeting. Now, I've not necessarily been able to see the interview in full. Unfortunately, I just haven't found a good portion of time to just sit and watch it. So I'm going to but I've seen enough of the clips and I've seen enough of the reactions to know that there was a widespread range of reactions to what he said. I'm going to start with you. Everybody wants to know, what did Jessie Naylor think of what Jed York had to say this week?
Yeah, listen, here's the thing about Jed York. I had a topic earlier this season kind of praising Jed York. And I was like, one thing you have to give Jed York credit for is he's kind of removed himself from the public eye most of the time, in the sense that he brought in Shanahan, he brought in Lynch, regardless of what your opinions are of them, and they haven't won a Super Bowl and all those things, whatever. He brought in his football guys, and he's kind of just gotten out of the way in the public eye and allowed them to operate to try to go build a perennial winner. And I think they've been successful in that. Yes, they've fallen short of the ultimate goal. I understand that, but they've remained competitive and they've gotten themselves in a pretty good spot. You have to give Jed York credit for that. It seems like, though, every time Jed York gets in front of a mic, he loves it a little bit too much, and he says things that maybe John Lynch has to backtrack in his favor. He says a little bit too much. He's a little bit too open. He's a little bit too honest. And for me, what frustrated me about what he had said this week wasn't that hey, he's matured as a man and he doesn't take losses as hard as what he used to and all those other things. It's that he took subtle shots at Eddie DeBartolo and tried to almost discredit what Eddie had brought to this team because he didn't do it in a salary cap era, or he would punch a wall after a loss, and that's a little bit immature. It just seemed like every chance he got, every time his uncle was brought up, every time the gold standard was brought up, it was like, well, yeah, I mean, if this was the DeBartolo era, I would have just paid Armstead and kept him. I mean, you think we didn't want to keep Armstead, or Aiyuk would have already been paid? And geez, it sure would be nice to have the two highest paid quarterbacks on the same roster, but that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the salary cap. And it's like, well, also your uncle did win a Super Bowl in the salary cap era. The very first year he won a Super Bowl. So he proved he could win with multiple coaches. He proved he could win in multiple eras. It just seemed a little bit bitter to me. And so for me, that was my frustration with what I had heard from Jed York. But overall, when I assess Jed York, I think he's improved as an owner. I think he does deserve credit for that. But it's like, dude, just understand that when you get in front of a mic and you're addressing 49er fans, we don't care that you're lining your pockets. We don't care that a new stadium got built. Everybody loves Candlestick anyways. Like, there's nostalgia there. They hate the way that the sun faces in the stadium and all, all those things. They care about rings. So you can talk about all the other things and try to prop up what's been done. The ultimate goal and the ultimate thing that fans care about, Super Bowl rings. And you're either delivering those rings or you're not delivering those rings. And if you're not delivering those rings, read the room and adjust. And I feel like he doesn't do that sometimes.
Krug, you've covered this guy since basically he became the owner of the 49ers. Some might say you've watched his entire career. Some might even say you've seen him grow up. Some might say you still haven't seen him growing up. What were your thoughts on what Jed York had to say at the owners' meetings last week?
Well, I like the fact that he pushed back on Grant's question of, your two different approaches to winning, because ultimately I think that I agree with Jed. I mean, you cannot be in this thing long term and be ashamed of going to the Super Bowl and losing to Patrick Mahomes. Now, I don't think that the team, Eddie's standard and this and that, those years ago, different rules, different everything, no cap. But then I just don't think that it's also very good for Jed to in any way try to diminish what Eddie did. I mean, if you want to say, you can't be ashamed of a successful season, I'm with you. But don't start going about Eddie didn't have a cap and Eddie didn't, stop. You're going to lose that. You're going to lose that. It's not a road you want to go down. Just acknowledge that Eddie was awesome and acknowledge that you would love to be equally awesome and that you've gotten close. So you're happy by what you've accomplished, but you're not there yet. And I'm driven and I'm bothered by it. And so it's like, I liked that he said, hey, I'm not ashamed, but don't go at Eddie, and I felt like he kind of pointed out some things. Well, Eddie didn't have this and Eddie didn't have that. And it's like, let's not go there. Let's just not go there. I did think it was interesting that he said it was not a big deal that he's the primary owner. I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting when he said that you got to build through the draft and he'd rather pay guys, big money who they drafted as opposed to signed in free agency. I don't like the flimsy excuse for losing a 5th round pick. We should have consulted the league sooner. Well, why didn't you? Nobody else is losing a 5th round pick.
Why are you trying to get $70K in the back channels from the player?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like that. And then it was like, well, we were overpaying. I don't care what your excuses. Those draft picks are gold pieces, and you can't give them away. And now you had to give one away. And to me, I wanted a little bit more explanation on that. Other than that, I thought he put a lot of pressure on Purdy by saying that he thinks he can be an all-time great. But that's Jed saying what he believes. So I don't put too much into Jed talking. I think Jed said to me earlier this year when we had a chance to talk to him before the Super Bowl, if I'm talking, generally bad things have happened. Either somebody has run a foul of the law, or there needs to be some clarification. And I kind of agree with him on that. If he's talking, it's not good. So, but as I said, I'm with him in his belief that he shouldn't be ashamed to lose the Super Bowl. I'm not with him when he starts to kind of start to point out where Eddie D had it easier than he did. It's like, no, don't go there.
I hate these shows when the three of us just agree on topics. It's always fun when there's a little bit of fighting between me and Larry on Brandon Aiyuk, or maybe someone said something on Larry's show about Jesse that you guys can fight about. Like, those shows usually are better, but I'm totally with you guys. And I want to highlight the positive parts of it first, because I think both of you did a good job of highlighting that. And I thought a lot of Jed York's answers in this interview were some of the most thoughtful and best, most mature answers I've ever gotten from Jed York in an interview. I thought his answer to Grant's question, while it might not be the satisfactory answer that people want to hear, I thought it was a mature and real and authentic answer, something that I don't think we always get to hear from Jed York. I thought all of those things were cool, because sometimes I feel like in front of the media, Jed York can come across a tad bit insecure, and that insecurity can lead to a little bit of inauthenticity when he's answering these questions. I thought in a lot of those answers, he was very secure, he was sure of himself, and it was cool to see. But just like as you guys did, it was the Eddie D part that stuck out to me. Now, it was a little different for me. I agree with you guys that that's a battle he's never going to win. Like, you evoke that name. It's so legendary. Even though the points he made might be valid about Eddie D, you're not winning that battle because the achievement's so high, and that achievement brings a certain level of protection from these minor details that you want to point out to bring up as blemishes in his legacy. It showed that to me also. It basically, to me, the big thing it showed beyond that was that he still has a little bit more ways to go in terms of overcoming that insecurity. There's still a little bit of Jed York is still the scarred young 28-year-old owner that hired Mike Singletary in his locker room week 15, got destroyed by the elder 49ers media early in his tenure, didn't really know what he was doing until Kyle Shanahan joined. There's still a little part of that Jed York to me still existing. And when he says those things about Eddie D, that just shows that to me, there's still a little bit of insecurity. Now, he's a human being. We're all going to be insecure in some capacity. I'm sure Jed York is sick of constantly hearing from day one how he was handed the franchise. He was the kid born with the silver spoon in his mouth. He didn't have to earn the 49ers or buy the 49ers. He was given the 49ers. He got to own the 49ers, and he got to do whatever he wanted at 28 years old with the football team. Reality is, that's life. That's his life. Good for him. I think that he's done a lot to overcome all the criticism he took early in his tenure, but I don't know that he's fully there. Jesse, why do I see Last Second Sports in the comments section?
I'm just saying, if you're going to insult me, at least spell it right. Like, come on, man.
Where's the insult of Jesse?
No. It's fine. You don't need to like block anybody. I'm just saying, be smart about it.
I wasn't gonna.
You got to come correct.
I just wanted to pull it up for everybody to see. Hey, let's.
You got to come correct
together.
What happened? Did somebody get misspelled?
Jesse's the king of Des nuts. Like, no, it's D's. Just spell it right.
I cannot find this comment, but Krug, I saw you nodding along there. What do you think? Do you think that there's still some of that insecurity with Jed York? Is that why he's bringing up Eddie D, or am I off there?
Well, it's weak, and it's excuse making. Don't make excuses. Don't be a weak excuse maker. I mean, that's what I would say to Jed. If he said, "Hey, give me some advice on how I'm being perceived by the Niner faithful," I'd say, have conviction, do your homework, trust in the people you hire, and don't ever, ever, ever make excuses. Don't make excuses. People don't like excuses. Now, it gets tired when you're the coach of a team and you're taking the podium every week and you're just like Johnny Fall on the sword guy and you just will never, ever point the finger at a player. That's also tired. Like your corner got beat for 3 touchdowns. Your quarterback threw 4 interceptions and you're like, hey, it's me. I got to be better. Shut up. Shut the hell up. Enough of that. Don't talk to us like we're idiots. I don't like that. I don't care. I respect it on some level, blame me, I'm the leader, but it also is like, it's so fake and it's so contrived and it's just not real.
There
I
is a
think
point it becomes disingenuous, right?
yeah, I mean, like, it's okay to be like, hey, we got lit up for 3 bills on the ground. We have to stop the run better than we're stopping it. And the buck stops with me, so I'm the one who's got to get it right. But I'm obviously not the one coordinating this or making the tackles. So we're going to have to collectively get a whole lot freaking better, or we're not going to be able to go where we need to go. Now, that's real. It's not really throwing anybody under the bus. It's taking accountability, but it's not just this canned ham. It's my fault. It's my fault. Don't blame them. Blame me. No, shut up. I'm blaming you and I'm blaming them. So, that kind of stuff bugs me. But, ultimately, I think that Jed understands. No, none of it matters. None of the talk matters. Stay out of it. You hired a coach. You hired a GM. Don't tweet. Don't second guess them. Don't comment publicly. And just be there to kind of guide, but don't, if one of your players, robs a bank, then yeah, you need to talk about it. So one of your players rapes a woman, yeah, you need to talk about it. But if you just get beat bad by the Chargers next year, don't feel like you need to talk. You don't. You have Shanahan, you have Lynch, you own the team. Let them talk. And I think he's starting to get that part of it, that there's no advantage in talking. He only talks when he needs to, for the most part, when he's mandated to. He obviously doesn't ever want to talk about any legalities or anything where the 49ers are, outside of football. He doesn't want to talk about football when they lose. Seems to only want to talk about football when they win. I would just say for him to get the best impact from the audience and from the media, just shut the hell up. Let Shanahan and Lynch talk exclusively.
I 100% agree. And just one last thing, and I know Jesse, you wanted to share, so maybe we can end it with you. I think that the funny part with him and Jed York and even the line of questioning of, is he emotional? Should he not be emotional? Eddie D punched the wall. Did he not punch the wall? Is we've seen emotional Jed York. And the funny thing is we hate emotional Jed York. We hate the guy who tweeted after the when they lost to the on Thanksgiving in 2014 to the Seattle Seahawks. Like, this isn't 49ers football. We hate the emotional guy who drove off from the Dolphins game, it was reported in 2020, because he was so angry at Brian Allen or whomever he was angry at during the COVID year at halftime, right? Like, as fans, that's not the guy that we want representing the organization. I understand that people are like, well, get emotional if he's not emotional. Why doesn't it seem like you care? Because they think that somehow, because they are so emotionally affected by their emotional affection, if Jed York is not crying or showing emotion in his face, he is not as affected as they are. I promise he's probably more affected. This directly affects his life rather than us, who get to move on with just the disappointment of not being able to show off the pride of our team winning the Super Bowl. But ultimately, I do defend him there and his answer there as well, because I think that we have seen him be emotional. And in fact, I don't like that emotional version of Jed York. I think it's immature. And I think, like Larry said, those are the moments where it's like, stop talking, get out of the way, just let the football people do football. And as you covered, as we started this topic, Jesse, before I send it to you, letting the football people do football is one of the things he has improved at tremendously. over the last few years.
Absolutely. But the question that you asked Larry was, is he essentially living in the shadow of his uncle? And
Right.
he is, to a certain point. I mean, until he gets his own ring, he's going to live in that shadow a little bit. And I think it's also perfectly okay to be mature the way that he's been. I think he's, for the most part, handled things way better, like I've said, but also acknowledge that, hey, the ultimate standard is the Super Bowl. Of course, that's what the standard is. Nobody's happy we didn't win the Super Bowl. I'm just better at dealing with the losses. But truly, my uncle set the standard. That's the standard we're still chasing. And I think we have the right people in the building to get there. We're closer every single year. We're going to break through. I really believe in that. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But what he does is he takes the high road in his words, but then he backtracks a little bit when he takes shots at his uncle every chance he gets. So it's like, are you taking the high road or are you not taking the high road? You say you're taking the high road, but then in the next sentence, you're not exactly taking the high road. You're sending mixed signals. Taking the high road would be saying, hey, I'm not going to hit the wall. That's emotional. That's what I used to do. I'm more mature. I've got my kids there. I have to hold it together. I get that. Yes, it was a successful season. I'm not looking at a non-Super Bowl victory and saying, hey, we didn't reach our ultimate goal. There was nothing good that happened. Of course, there was good that happened, but the ultimate goal does, Grant, the ultimate goal still remains the same. We are chasing Lombardi trophies. That is the ultimate goal. My vision is not strayed from that. That is a standard that was set by my uncle. That is something that we're still chasing. I believe we have everybody in the building to get there. We're chasing that. We're right there. We're going to break through. I know that we are. We've got the right people in place. That's all you got to say. But saying you're taking the high road and then taking shots, it's like, oh, I don't know. What are we actually doing here?
One day, Jessie Naylor, somebody's going to watch one of these shows and just hire you as their PR manager. I feel like that's the number one thing that we get is what you should have said for Jessie Naylor. And it's always what you really should have said, because you're right. If he just says what you said, we probably aren't even talking about him for the last 20 minutes. And our show maybe moves on to Larry Krueger's Trent Baalke impression 40 minutes before Cosmo says, okay, last topic means 2 more from Larry.
I think Jed seems a lot more confident since the hair plugs. I think he seems a lot more confident.
Does it make a difference?
Makes him look slimmer.
He's got more hair up top, and I think he looks better, and so he feels more confident. Now I don't know,
Shanahan
but
gives him a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
I think that's helped him. Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead.
the guy, I really, and I said it before the Super Bowl, that if the Niners win the Super Bowl, that his football career is more complete, that Kyle's career is more complete, and that his career is more complete. Now they didn't win the Super Bowl. John and Kyle still have not completed they could still do more to complete their resumes. Jed, though, I think with this move gets he's a made man now, regardless if they win or lose. I mean, he now has shown his mom and dad, or mom and stepdad, or whatever it is. I don't know what the exact relationships are, but I think he's shown John and Denise that he can be successful with the 49ers as on the field and as an entity, as a business entity. The stadium was a big part of that business side of things. But now look what the Niners have done internationally. Look what they've done with Leeds. Look at the way they're positioned financially. I think under Jed, they've now own their own stadium and have a successful football side of things. And so in a lot of ways, even without the Super Bowl, he's already a made man among his mom and dad. I still think John and Kyle need that Super Bowl to kind of complete their football resume. And John's already a Hall of Famer. John can do a lot of different things. But if John can be the general manager of a winning Super Bowl team, I feel like his football life and career is complete. And let's be honest, Shanahan is one of the best coaches in football that just doesn't have a ring yet. He, in a lot of ways, is Andy Reid before Andy Reid. And I think they're, I don't think that when who's the chief defensive coordinator?
Spagnola.
Spagnuolo. When Spagnuolo talked glowingly of Brock Purdy, there were a lot of people who were like, well, what do you expect him to say? No. No, he can say nothing. He can say nothing at all. The fact that he was so glowing of Brock Purdy, I think is real. I think that was genuine. So I think the Niners have a good young quarterback, and I think they've got a good young head coach who is, at this point, to date, shown a propensity to shoot himself in the foot in big games. And that has to reverse itself before he's going to win rings. But I do kind of feel like Jed's already kind of now that made man. You know, he's already climbed the mountaintop, and the Super Bowl will just be the cherry on top.
I'm gonna push back a little bit. I'm gonna push back a little bit on the Shanahan thing, because here's the perception. It's interesting what you said, the words that you chose, Larry. You said we have a good young head coach. He's not the young guy anymore. You know that he is actually right at league average as far as coaching age. I think he's like 17th youngest in the league at this point as far as coaches go. He's not the new young hot commodity. He's approaching 10 years. I think that there's a better chance, now that they didn't win the Super Bowl this last year, if they don't win it in the next 3 years, which there's a good chance that doesn't happen, he's been here for 10 years with no ring. He's beyond the good, young, fiery coach. He's not that guy anymore. Now he's the grizzled veteran, and it's like, dude, at some point, like, you can have all the pedigree in the world, and you can be the greatest coach to not have a ring, but at some point, like, you do have to break through. And I know that that's what you were saying. Ultimately, he has to get that to kind of write his legacy, but he's not the young coach that we perceive him to be anymore. He's just not.
Well, young is, I'm looking at Andy Reid, right? And I'm looking at Reid and I'm looking at him. So you're right. He's not as young as some. And his clock is ticking. And let's be honest. You shoot yourself in the foot once, could have happened to anybody. You shoot yourself in the foot 3 times, 4 times, like Shanahan has, and now we start to wonder, is this your MO? Are you the guy that's going to shoot himself in the foot in every big situation? So every failed, run at a title makes everybody a little bit more like, is this the guy? But what I see is Andy Reid pre-Mahomes and pre-Kansas City. And now let's see what he does over the next 4 or 5 years with what I think is a good young quarterback and, having all total control. But I agree. It's not like if you said to me, is it a fait accompli that Kyle Shanahan gets his ring? I'd say no. I'd say it's very much up in the air. So, but I still like, if you said to me, do you like the chances of Shanahan and Purdy winning a ring together? I do like their chances.
So I think both of you are right, because I think Larry is right. Shanahan is probably still young into his entire coaching tenure, like his life as a head coach. But Jesse's also right, where he's no longer young into his 49ers tenure. Like 7 years as the head coach of a team is ridiculous amount of time. It's way above the league average head coach time in terms of job turnover. And what's interesting to me is when you bring up Andy Reid, right? And it's a fair comparison when you look at just where Shanahan has fallen short early in his career and where Reid has fallen short early in his career. Well, Philadelphia ultimately ended up firing Andy Reid. And they also ultimately ended up winning a Super Bowl before Andy Reid got one in the next place. And that's where things are tricky with Shanahan, right? Because you're right. He could just be Andy Reid before Mahomes. And I used to always say when I first started doing these YouTube shows and all of that, obviously I'm a huge Kyle Shanahan fan. I've been one since 2017. I always used to say my biggest fear is that Kyle Shanahan will ultimately get his Super Bowl with his second tenure, not with his first team. Just, Pete Carroll, it took a couple of teams. Belichick, it was his second team. Reid, it was his second team. There's just a few guys that seem to have taken their second team to do it. And for whatever reason, I felt like Shanahan was one of those guys. Even when you bring up the Andy Reid comparison, I understand what you mean, but that's what I immediately think of, because at the end of the day with Reid, even though he was such a great coach for Philadelphia, and even though the existing infrastructure in Philadelphia is a lot built by him, right? All those executives from Howie Roseman on, they were all developed into great executives under Andy Reid in that coaching tenure with that coaching legacy. All those great defensive coaches they had from the Jim Johnson staff, from McDermott to Spagnuolo to John Harbaugh, all of those guys from there, he got fired. And I wonder when Jesse talks about Shanahan, hey, he's 3 years away from 10 years if they don't win it in the next 3 years. I believe wholeheartedly Shanahan's a Super Bowl winning head coach. But if he gets to that point, I do think it could end up being the Andy Reid situation for him. And it would be hard to stomach because I don't know that the 49ers would have another option at that point. But I also don't know that you would ever want to get rid of a coach like Shanahan. And you would have to hope that you can do what Philadelphia did, which is win one before he does.
Yeah, that is one thing though. I do want to bring that up when, everybody talks about how Andy Reid has been successful, and he has. He's been wildly successful after getting Mahomes, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. He traded up for Mahomes. He went to Texas Tech. He learned that offense. I mean, he did everything he could to ensure that Mahomes was going to be the best that he could be. So he deserves credit for that. But that is the part of the story that most people don't talk about. Is like Philly made a mistake by moving on. If they would have just kept him, it's like, well, no, they won a ring too. They did win a ring, and we do got to talk about that. That's part of the story. So, it's one of those things where, eventually, and hopefully it doesn't get to this, hopefully Shanahan just wins a ring because I think he is a very good head coach. I mean, top 7-ish in the league at worst, we're talking about a good head coach, but if he does move on, it doesn't mean that the 49ers can't also win a ring if he does as well. So both can be successful if it's done right.
Yeah, and you're right. When you bring up Kansas City and Philly, and I'll kick it to you, Krug, our good friend, our mutual friend, the coach, the guy who, fills in the show for me sometimes. Shout out to the coach, Bang Bang 49. Make sure you're subscribed to him. He made the point to me this offseason when it comes to Shanahan that the existing infrastructure that Shanahan has built, if used correctly, can be used to leverage more wins with that tenure. And you look at Philadelphia as an example. Now, we're way down the roads of talking about Shanahan even not being the coach of the 49ers. This is only a topic for March 28th and March 28th only because it's pretty irrelevant to the 49ers 2024 season. But if you look at Philadelphia's success post Andy Reid, yeah, Andy Reid, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, they've been the most successful franchise probably over the last 6-7 years. But since Andy Reid left, Philadelphia's been damn successful. 2 winning seasons with Chip Kelly, 2 winning seasons with Doug Peterson, winning the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson, going to the Super Bowl with Nick Sirianni. So for a team that lost Andy Reid, one of the greatest coaches ever, a guy who's has a chance to be the first coach to three-peat, they have still been wildly successful, and they were ultimately able to do what they didn't do with Andy Reid in that tenure. It's a very interesting thing when you talk about Reid because you wouldn't expect that the Philadelphia Eagles would be successful despite the fact that they lost such a great coach. Krug, what do you think? This all started from you.
Well, I mean, first of all, Andy Reid, I think, got like 13 years in Philly before they let him go.
Mm-hmm.
He just never had. None of those Super Bowls were. I don't think the Eagles were ever favored, right? To be,
they made it to
the
one Super Bowl,
yeah.
and they lost to New England. Brady. But they made it. I think they won 5 straight NFC East titles and went to 4 straight NFC Championship games from 01 to 05. I want to say with Donovan McNabb, but that was really also the defense, right? They had Jim Johnson, the exotic blitzing.
But I'm just saying, like, was McNabb? Did McNabb go on elsewhere and win Super Bowls? No. So it's like, I believe in Brock Purdy. I think that Brock Purdy I think he showed us on Super Bowl Sunday that the moment's not too big for him, but it's time for the 49ers to build a team around this kid. And that means a better right side of your offensive line, better defense, maybe a number 1 corner. One of the things that we haven't talked about this week at all that we talked about a lot last week was I threw out Surtain as a topic. You guys were like, man, it's going to cost heaven and earth for Surtain. And you guys might be right, but it sure didn't cost heaven and earth for Snead.
You were right.
Snead went for a 7th and a 3rd and a 7th this year and the 3rd next year. Is it really going to take 2 number 1s for Surtain? But beyond that, I just think that I'm totally willing to discuss moving on from Shanahan. But I got to have somebody that I really think can get it done. Like, if by chance Sean McVay got fired in LA or quit, I would seriously think about making a run at McVay and moving off of Shanahan. But outside of that, I don't really see the coach out there that makes me say, yeah, I'm going to run Shanahan off for that guy. But I'm not wed to Shanahan like we're related. And if there are better options, I'm all ears, man. I don't care if it's a college coach. I don't care if it's a freaking high school coach. I don't care who it is. If you got somebody that you think is really better than Shanahan and you could convince me that he's a better coach than Shanahan, I would replace Shanahan. I think the 49ers really should be open-minded to replacing Shanahan if a better coach comes along, but only if a better coach comes along. Other than that, I'd say give him 3 to 5 years here with Purdy to see what he can do. If we get to that point and it hasn't happened, then maybe it's not going to happen. And maybe at that point, a better candidate pops up on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his contract. I think it's set to expire 2027. I think we're going to have a lot of the answers by then, or at least a better focus of it. If they get past, we disagree on this, Larry, but I'm going to go down the path and let's say Brock Purdy is the guy. He's the franchise guy, right? Well, if he is, and that does put a little bit of pressure on Shanahan to get it done, especially during the rookie contract. If he doesn't get it done during the rookie contract, what's going to change when he's getting paid $55 million a year? Can you really expect that Shanahan's going to get it done there? So I think those questions start to arise. So those are things that we got to look at. But real quick, I do want to talk about the Surtain thing. The biggest difference in Snead and Surtain is that Snead is 4 years older, and Snead automatically, from day one that you acquire him, you have to pay him a boatload of money. If you acquire Surtain, you still have 2 years of cheap play before he gets that big money contract, or that money contract kicks in. So that's the big difference. 4 years younger plus the contract. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and Surtain is better. I mean, Surtain is better than Snead. The price tag is going to be higher. I just think that when you look at all the factors, I think there's a chance that, I guess I'm excited by the idea, but I'm also scared as hell by the notion that he could wind up in Kansas City, in Philly, in Green Bay, in Detroit. I don't want to see the Lions, who just got DJ Reader and somebody else that was good. I forget.
Carlton Davis.
Surtain. I don't want to see Surtain in Detroit. Really, 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 really don't want to see that. So I think you're right. I think the price tag will be higher than Snead. But the two number ones, I don't know. I don't know what the price tag's going to be. But if I were the Niners, I absolutely would stay in the deal flow all the way till the bitter end, just to make sure that he does not show up in like 2 or 3 places that you can't have him show up. And I would be willing. I'd be willing to move my, like if the price tag were a 1 this year and a conditional 2 and 3 next year, all right. If it's 2 and 3 this year and a second next year, that could be a 1 if the Niners win the Super Bowl, something, some condition like that. I'm this year, because of the way they attacked free agency and how few needs they still have left to fill and how many draft picks they have left, I think it makes sense for them this year to go after Surtain. I don't know if it's doable, but as I said, I just don't want to see him I really don't want to see him in Detroit. If he's in Detroit, that's gonna swing the balance of power to Detroit, I think.
Would you give up a first and a second this year for him? Like let's say that was the asking price. They want the first and the second this year. You saying yes or no?
I would.
I just want to see what the limits are on it.
I would
Okay.
Because to me, the Niners need two primary things. They need a number 1 corner to get Ambry Thomas off the field and to have just an absolute top tier back end. And then I think they need to build their fortress around Brock Purdy. And so like Zach Frazier from West Virginia, somebody I'd be really interested in. I watched film on him the other day. I could not believe how dominant he was.
He's going to go round 2, though, yeah?
He's probably going to go late round 1 or early round 2. Like if the Niners if they decided they wanted Zach Frazier, they could probably trade from 31 to 41, add a third round pick or a second round pick, and still get a guy like Frazier at 41. I think he's slated to go anywhere from like 28 to about 50, somewhere in there.
But you're bypassing that if you go get Surtain, right? Like, so that whole like protect Brock Purdy thing goes out the window the moment you trade for Surtain.
Yeah, Surtain to me is truly a difference maker, and there's a right and wrong time to trade for a number 1 corner, and I think the right time is where the Niners are at. When you like the Niners, the biggest failure of all will be if they stay at 1 and 2 and pick ordinary players that never amount to much or don't amount to much for like 3 or 4 years. So that to me is the biggest fear. I don't like trading picks for veterans. I like trading veterans for picks. I like going the other way. But man, if you could get Surtain and put him on this team right now, I'd have a really hard time bypassing that, because I really think that could push you over the top.
Yeah, I mean, those trades aren't necessarily a guarantee, though, right? Like, Seattle tried to do that twice. They tried to give a first-round pick for Percy Harvin. They tried to give a first-round pick for Jimmy Graham, and then they tried to give 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams. Now, I do think it's a different situation, Krueg. Obviously, Surtain plays a premium position. Jimmy Graham did not play a premium position. Percy Harvin did not play a premium position. Jamal Adams did not play a premium position. And then I would probably argue Surtain is the best player of all of those 3 guys. I just tend to push caution into the, just give up first-round picks, get a highly paid veteran, and that's a better solution than a rookie. I tend to think that all utilizations of draft picks is a crapshoot in some ways. And I do agree with your point of getting Surtain. He makes the 49ers better. But I also think that the 49ers do at some point have a limit on, look, they have 9 star players on this team that are all so highly paid, or 8, and they're about to add Brandon Aiyuk to the mix. Is a 10th one really what this team needs? Or do they need what you're talking about, Krueg? Some depth dogs, some guys that are going to bring a new mindset, some depth, a younger energy, a little bit of a different
They
energy.
are deep. They are deep on the corner right now. Here would be my question.
But are they? Is Ambry Thomas even, like, when I look at deep, right?
Deep.
I would think I don't look at Ambry Thomas as a guy that you can rely upon to play. I think they have 2 starters and then a bunch of guys that could possibly make the roster.
Okay, but I really like the free agent kid they signed from the Saints, Yadam. And
Yeah,
I like Womack. I like Luter. I think these guys have a future.
Sure,
so
but
I think they're deep. I just don't
at the
think
end of the year. There's no guarantees making the team.
Oh, I know. I mean, and why was he inactive? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know. To me, he looked good in camp. He looked good in practice. So, Lynch did say we have confidence in these guys. Now, what else is he going to say? So on and so forth. But I think they're pretty deep at corner. I just think they need that difference maker. And I love Max Melton in the draft. I think Max Melton from Rutgers could be that number 1 guy. If you could promise me that Max Melton was a true number 1 corner, I'd rather have Max Melton in the draft than trade for Surtain. But what they don't need is another flyer on Enos Rakestraw and then have Enos Rakestraw. He doesn't
want R.W. McQuarters or Mike.
Yeah, Rowe. Or just, you better get it right. That's all. They can't really get it wrong and win the Super Bowl. So, that was, Les Snead was getting one right. He was getting one wrong. He was getting one right. He was getting one wrong. So they decided, you know what, screw this. Let's trade a couple of these guys for Ramsey. And let's get, more veterans and not be as deep in the future. And they kind of drove their team into salary cap hell. But I would be okay with that at this point if the Niners could climb the mountain and get that ring. We'll see.
Jesse?
I love Melton.
Oh, yeah. This is the third time you mentioned
Melton. Listen, I agree with you on Melton. I'm all in on Melton. That's the kid I'm in on. But this one's interesting because, okay, if they trade for Surtain, I understand what you're saying, Vish, but really by the time his contract kicks in, they're
Yeah,
not going to have all those guys there,
right.
right? They
Half of
already
them will
moved
be
on
gone.
from Armstead. Hargrave's likely going to be gone. Trent Williams might
Kittle.
be retired. Kittle, they're like a lot of these guys are gone. And one thing that I like about trading for Patrick Surtain is you're guaranteeing a blue chip superstar for the next 5 to 7 years after this wave of talent moves on, which we're a year or two away from that happening, frankly. So I like that aspect of it. What I don't like, though, is that you're getting an expensive guy or a soon to be expensive guy, and you are passing on restocking the cupboard from a depth standpoint, which I think has been a bit of an issue with this team. I think the 49ers, it's interesting because we say, hey, they're deep. They're deep at corner. It's like, well, yeah, they're deep with a bunch of mid guys. I mean, we just tried to sell. A lot of people are selling Yadam as like, oh my God, they got Yadam. It's like, no. Yadam's 28 years old. He's been in the league for 6 years and has 2 interceptions. If you think that's the answer to this number 2 corner spot, more power to you. I don't know that that's necessarily it. Now, I'm not saying he can't fill in from time to time, but when you're comparing the depth that they have, it's like, yeah, Yadam, Ambry, maybe Womack can step up, Luter.
People are
It's like you
excited
got
about Yadam because of who's existing on this roster.
right. That's exactly my point. So you've got a bunch of guys that are so there's depth in the sense that they're all kind of in the same area as far as talent, but that depth immediately goes away, and the excitement of that depth goes away the moment that you have a Patrick Surtain. It's like, well, if Surtain goes down and Yadam steps in, how excited are you about that? Or if Charvarius Ward goes down and you got to play Ambry Thomas, how excited are you about that? All of a sudden, the depth isn't really depth, right? So I really can see this from both sides. I don't know. The 49ers are going to do what they feel is the right answer. Ultimately, I think that they would love to have a talent like Patrick Surtain. I don't think that Patrick Surtain's going anywhere, at least not this offseason. So ultimately, they're going to make those picks, and let's hope they can hit on pick, especially 1 and 2, to get some difference makers long term for this team, because this draft is crucial.
And regardless of who it is, I think we all agree that a third corner for the 49ers, a guy that can be relied upon to play snap after snap, and you end up being a starter pretty much with how much nickel teams play today, is needed. Whether it's kicking Lenore inside and having that guy be an outside guy, or whether it's having that guy be a full-time nickel and having Lenore play full-time on the outside, they need it. Because as I said to Krug, to me, it's Ward, it's Lenore, and then it's a bunch of guys that may or may not make the team. From Ambry, I think Luter is probably the next guy I would say is guaranteed to make the team. And then from Ambry, Womack, Yadam, all of these guys, it's 2 of 3, 1 of 2.
I'm just worried as hell when I look at this. They need a corner, and Quinyon Mitchell is awesome, but he's not going to be there. I think Arnold has a lot of talent. He's not going to be there. Nate Wiggins is like 160 pounds. He's probably not going to be there. Kool-Aid McKinstry's a nice player, but he's got a Liz Frank, doesn't run fast.
Is it a Jones or a Liz Frank?
I thought it was a Liz
Jones
Frank.
fracture. I think it's a Jones. Yeah.
And then Kamari Lassiter has got great movement ability, but he ran a really slow 40 time. I mean, there's like, it's a deep group of corners, but man, I mean, there's a lot of misses in there, and it's I don't know that the Niners can afford a miss. They need to find a really good corner. Yeah, I mean,
it's a really high risk position.
I like some other guys, but you know what? Mikey Sainristil is a good player, but he's 5'10", 175. And some of these guys are kind of small. So I don't know. You're gonna have to get it right. I like 5 or 6 guys down the board. I like, Willie Drew from Virginia State. There's guys down the board I really like. But, man, there's a lot of misses there. And I just think that where they are slated to pick at 31, Mitchell, Arnold, Wiggins, McKinstry probably off the board. So then they're looking at Rakestraw, who's like 180 pounds, Lassiter, who doesn't run fast, TJ Tampa, who hits like a truck, but some people are concerned about can he play any kind of off coverage at all. And then it gets even more speculative after that. So I love Max Melton. I love TJ Tampa. There's a couple other guys, but I mean, man, if they take the wrong corner and they just have like some guy on the bench who was drafted high, who's got some traits, and they still haven't found that. Every time the Niners have won the Super Bowl in my lifetime, they've had a true number one corner. And they don't have one now, in my opinion. I love Mooney. I don't think he's a number one. I think he's a really, really good number two. And I love Lenore. But and I think he's good in the slot. But if they got another dominant outside corner, I think it would help them dramatically.
For sure. Guys, I just saw in the chat somebody put that Brandon Aiyuk went
I
on
just was
Shannon
looking
Sharp
at that. Yeah.
and
Yep.
Chad Ochocinco. I'm not gonna lie, I really want to
I
go
want to
watch
see
that.
it. Yeah.
I've become a big Unk and Ocho fan of recent. It's like watching TV for me. This is like my new favorite TV show. I love when Unk says something and Ocho's like, stay with me now. So I'm really excited to go watch that. I don't know if there's anything else you guys wanted to hit on, but we're right at an hour and 30 minutes. I think sometimes with the big show, we know that we're capable of going 3 hours, so we should leave the people wanting just a little bit more. Larry Krueger, Pat Surtain, and cornerback talk. Do you guys have anything here before we go? What do you guys have coming up? Let's start with you, Larry.
Well, what day? Let's see. Today's Thursday, so tomorrow I think I'm streaming with Grant and Chase Senior, and of course our early morning Friday stream with the great Damon Bruce, and then on Saturday, the coach stops by at 9, and we'll do a full Saturday, and the coach has been blowing up on the Saturday shows. So yeah, just the same kind of thing. I'll be producing videos, probably one on this Aiyuk thing. I guess I would have one question for you guys. Do you think Aiyuk, at the end of the day, wants to be here and get paid, or does he want to get paid and be elsewhere? If you had to say.
Oh,
Do you think he wants to be a Niner, or do you think, because so much of the dialogue, the Niners make it seem like they want him. The fans no doubt want him. The Niners could be saying anything. It's all about, they said they loved Armstead, but then they offered him super low ball money. You really speak with your offer more than your words. So what do you think? Do you think the Niners are being true to their word when they say they really want him, and they're going to back that up with an offer that really reflects they want him? Or do you think they just want to be on the record with the fans of saying they want him? They're going to lowball him. He knows it, and because he doesn't seem like he's at all warming to their compliments of him at all. What's your guys' read on it?
I didn't personally look at it that way. In terms of the contract, I think with him, I think he just wants to be paid. I think he would like to be a 49er, but I don't think he's pressed that he has to be a 49er. I think he's very confident that his game can translate no matter where he goes. I think he would like that contract to come from the 49ers, but if the 49ers don't give him that money, I think he's good going somewhere else. I think some of the disconnect that's coming across, I think it's just good marketing from Brandon Aiyuk. I think his responses have been terrific for the 49ers. Look, Larry, if you look at Brandon Aiyuk, the one thing, and I said this on Monday with Rob, your former opponent, Rob Stats Guerrera, by the way, Larry. I said this on Monday with them.
Which may be why, since you're appearing on that network, maybe why you beat Grant. Think about it. Just think
maybe. I mean,
you could be cultivating fans inside the walls of what's it called again?
Gold Standard.
Gold
Standard. You could be cultivating positive relationships inside the walls of Gold Standard by your participation, and that could be the key to you taking down the great Grant Cohn.
I could be, and you're probably right. But if you say that, then I didn't just beat him on merit. So let's all pretend like I beat him on like some merit, okay? Let's pretend and let's continue. But with what I said with Rob is the thing that's been missing for Brandon Aiyuk in his career is national headlines. He just doesn't get talked about enough. He doesn't get talked about for how good he is. And, part of being a big-time NFL player, part of getting that money, getting the marketing is people talking about you. There hasn't been that for Brandon Aiyuk yet. And I think this is part of his responses and all of that this offseason is just him having a good PR team by responding to what John Lynch says. Guess what? SVP now moves you up from, hey, John Lynch said this about receiver Brandon Aiyuk who's seeking a contract, to now you get 10 minutes on why did Brandon Aiyuk tweet this about this. So I think that's really what it is. I think some of the back and forth is a little overplayed, but I think a lot of this is just Aiyuk's opportunity for the first time in his career to garner a little bit of attention and get some media to his name. And I think he should relish it. He's one of those players that has never gotten the media appreciation for how talented he is. And he's never had that notoriety or spotlight because there's always been others on the 49ers to take just a little bit away from him. This is the first time he's the one sole 49ers in the headlines. Relish it, live with it, love it. What do you think, Jesse?
No, I think that's a great take, and I completely agree with it. But as far as Aiyuk goes, first of all, I think the 49ers definitely want him here. I think that he wants to be here, but I also think that he wants to be a bigger part of the offense. I think that he knows who he is as a player. I think all these guys that get paid, they have a little bit of an ego to them. And I feel like he's the young guy, the up-and-comer, who's about ready to get paid, deservedly so. And I think that he feels he's the alpha and he deserves more targets and he wants to build a little bit of a legacy too. So I'm sure some of those conversations are going on with this. It's like, hey, I want to be a 49er. I want the big money, of course, but like I want to be a focal point of this offense. Like, can you guarantee that going forward, I'm going to be a bigger piece? I think that's probably a little bit important to him too.
I don't know. I mean, if that is, wouldn't he be pretty happy right now? He did lead them in touchdowns and average average yards per game. He led them in targets. He led them in receptions. He led them in receiving yards. And, he did lead. Didn't he lead them in yards per game?
But in the biggest game of the year,
you want to say
focal point of the game plan, though, right?
Yeah,
like
you
at
want
the
to
end
say
of the day, biggest game of the year. Biggest game of the year, it was get the ball to Christian McCaffrey first. It was get the ball to Debo second. It was get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk third. I think Jesse's point is, hey, big moments for the 49ers. It's not just have the guy lead the team in targets because he's the healthiest player throughout. Big moments, 3rd and 8, Super Bowl on the line. Instead of trying to throw an in-cut to Debo Samuel who pulled his hamstring 2 plays ago with Trent McDuffie playing inside leverage against him. Let's throw the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. Let's try to get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk in that situation. I think that's what he means.
Well, you know what? I hope Aiyuk is back because if you ask me, between Aiyuk, CMC, Kittle, and Debo and Jennings and Juszczyk, all their weapons, who is the guy who I have the most confidence having the biggest year next year? It's definitely Aiyuk.
100%.
Debo is
really
well because Jennings I think is more of a third guy. Juszczyk is not in the running,
but the CMC is the one surprised me a little bit.
But the attrition, right? Two back-to-back 300-touch seasons.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
He's been ridden hard, man. I just think Aiyuk. I think there's more there. I think he's got double-digit touchdowns coming. I think he's got an 80-catch season coming, maybe a 100-catch season if he were in the right situation.
Got a full offseason with Brock, too, now. He didn't have that last year.
He could be more featured, for sure. I mean, I'm sure if he's unhappy at all and you guys are saying he wants to be more featured, I could see that argument. I could see the argument that says, hey, man, throw me 5 more balls every game or I want to see at least 125 targets next year. I don't know, but I think he's the one guy where when you watch him, you go, you know what? He could be even bigger and better than he is.
Agreed. 100%. And I think his confidence has been a theme. We talked about Jed York's confidence, Fred Warner's confidence so much in this show. He's a player to me that's just growing and it's brimming and it's growing and it's growing. And I still think, Krug, you and I debated about him. You felt like there's another level to Brandon Aiyuk that he didn't quite reach this year. Ultimately, I agree with you. I think there is another level to Brandon Aiyuk beyond even what he showed this year, and I'm expecting that to only emerge in the subsequent years. Krug, hit with you.
The other thing,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing that I think has to be factored in, we didn't talk about, but the rule changes on the special teams and the Niners sending such a huge contingent of people to go watch Malachi Corley at Western Kentucky makes me think that they may have an interest in Corley in the second round or even trading back, from their first round pick into the high second round and taking a guy like Corley, because I think in a lot of ways his skill set fits perfectly into that new return rules that they've incorporated. And if they do want to kind of go this year and kind of adjust next year, let's just say they're not going to trade Aiyuk, they're going to sign Aiyuk, then I think if that's their plan, I think we would all be in agreement that there's a high likelihood that they'll try to at least trade Deebo Samuel next offseason. And if they are going to do that, then a guy like Corley in this draft makes all the sense in the world. So if you said to me, man, try to handicap what the Niners are thinking, I think they love Malachi Corley. I think they're going to try to wind up with him. I think they're going to utilize him on special teams this year. And I think that he's going to be, the guy that kind of keeps the feet to the fire of all these other guys. And then in the end of the year, they probably trade Deebo. That would be my guess of where they're at.
I agree with you. I think that Deebo's likely not here, not this next season, but the season after. I would look out for Washington and Corley. I mean, they might be looking for their Deebo, and maybe they feel like he's that guy. So I don't know. We'll see.
Interesting. They did get rid of Curtis Samuel. He went to Buffalo, so they have an availability for that style of player.
And Washington has been hugely busy this offseason and
signing a lot of guys.
Yeah, they're signing a lot of guys, and they're making a lot of moves. And I don't know if you guys believe the rumor, but there's rumor that they want to take J.J. McCarthy with the second pick and not Daniels. But then there's other people saying no, Daniels to Washington at number 2 is a lock if Williams goes 1. I don't know.
I would take Daniels, but I wouldn't be shocked if they take McCarthy, because here's why. Do you know who McCarthy reminds me of? A lot of people won't say this. Trey Lance. Small sample size. You see the small sample size with pro traits, big arm, athletic, big guy. He's very limited amount of reps, but those limited amount of reps are curated to be pro reps where he's throwing over the middle of the field in NFL timing with NFL footwork. Who was the guy who, according to Chris Sims before the draft, was in love with Trey Lance? The guy who became the GM in Washington.
Yeah, you would assume that it's Adam Peters, yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I don't know if you guys saw today. I think Michael Penix ran in the 4.4.
He says J.J. McCarthy has more experience on a bigger stage. Yes, but it was basically the same thing. Trey Lance was throwing the ball 15 times a game for a buzzsaw in Division 1. Is it Division 1A in the FCS? Division 1A in the FCS. And McCarthy was throwing the ball 19 times a game for a buzzsaw in Michigan.
I did see Penix. What do you run, like a 4.51 or something like that?
4.5, and he jumped 36 inches.
I thought my kid said 4.49 or something like that. No, I don't know.
I saw 4.5, so 4.49, 4.5.
I think initially they threw out like 4.46, but then they corrected it to 4.51. I could be wrong though. I don't know. Who knows? Either way, it's blazing fast for a quarterback.
Yeah,
flying.
Who also has a crazy gun and almost won the Heisman. Yeah, I mean, Penix is the wild card in this draft for sure.
I gotta say, Penix, when I watched him play against Oregon and some of those other games in the Pac-12, I fell in love with watching him play. When I watched his film, I liked him a little bit less.
We know how Krueg feels about
I told
Penix,
you.
But we won't let him get into trouble tonight, Krueg. We won't let him get into some trouble.
Everybody knows I'm a big Penix fan, but my buddy, Dave Softy Mahler, who does pregame for the Washington Huskies,
he doesn't like him,
and says that he's that he operated in a totally clean pocket, and that he benefited from the awesome offensive line, and that he's in his receivers, and thinks he's more of a second or third round pick. So I don't know. I'm just glad. I'm glad the Niners don't need to handicap this quarterback draft, because, guys, I think this is one of the most difficult quarterback drafts to handicap in years. I really do. I think it's going to be they're going to be busts here. I don't know which one's going to be a bust. There's going to be stars here. You know what I mean? You're going to make or break your scouting career on handicapping this draft quarterback wise. It's very difficult.
I agree with you.
100%. Guys, we went 14 minutes after what we said in honor of Cosmo.
One more topic.
That's just what we do. Larry Krueger gives us one more topic, as he tends to do. So I'm going to throw it to Jesse and be Jesse, what do you have going on next week? What is going on with you?
The real question is ketchup or mustard? No, I'm just joking. No. I'll probably watch this Shannon Sharpe interview and then put out some quick thoughts on it. We'll see what came of it. One thing I like about Aiyuk is I feel like he's very candid. So you get the real answers, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'm curious to see what he says in this.
Me too. And I will say one thing. I love Shannon Sharpe and Chad Ochocinco. Like, I love that podcast. But I have heard them talk about Brandon Aiyuk in the past, and they are a little ill-informed to me on Brandon Aiyuk and what kind of a player he is and how good he is. They're more informed on Debo and some of the other stars. So I'm interested to see what type of questions they ask and how prepared the questions are. Of course, they're going to be great because those two guys have such amazing personalities and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to football. But I am interested to see specific to Brandon Aiyuk what the questions are like. But everybody, thank you so much for watching. This was an awesome show. Krueg, Jesse, love you guys. Can't thank you enough for coming on. It's always fun for us to stream together. We will be back next Thursday on the Krueg Show, where Pig in a Pickle, Marine Auto Glass, all the usual suspects will make their big return. We'll see you there. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.